Hi, welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh, and today I want to talk about pets. Specifically, I was talking to one of you in the comments section of one of my videos about what to do if your players want to have pets, but none of them are rangers. Melkaz44 asks, weird question. Many of my players, including myself, want animal companions, but none of them is a ranger, and even less a Beastmaster. So far, I've let them use animal handling to talk to them, but I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. Do you think you can make a video explaining possible options for having animal companions? Absolutely. It's actually an issue that comes up quite a lot in games, because everybody loves a pet. And everyone kind of has this idea of hopefully, a bit like maybe Dragon Age Origins, where you can have a faithful Mabari warhound, that this cute or awesome creature that you've conjured, that you've created in D&D, might sort of follow the party around. But no one's a ranger. The main rule of thumb in D&D is always, let's do what's most fun first. Everything else can follow. But we do definitely need to balance the game, and we can't detract away from the power or the specialness of a whole class of Beastmaster Rangers. So the first thing that we need to do is address the balance of the party, because if everybody in the party suddenly really wants pets, then that's essentially giving some maybe less powerful than normal characters, but a whole bunch of extra characters in the party which can really shift the challenge rating of your party when it comes to combat encounters. So the first place to look is actually at the Ranger class. We're going to use the Beastmaster as a guide. So there are actually two versions of the Beastmaster Ranger. There's the classic version, which is in the player's handbook right now, and there's also the Unearthed Arcana version, which was released much more recently. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, as well as possibly on the screen here, if I can figure that out. Now, the classic Beastmaster is an often overlooked class archetype in 5th edition, because it was deemed to be a little bit weak. Certainly compared to the Hunter spec, which has some astronomical damage numbers when it comes to things like Colossus Slayer and Volley. Whereas with Beastmaster, obviously you do get a pet, but they have to be of challenge rating 1/4 or lower. Now in this spec, the beast, the companion, is more like a kind of magic weapon. It's more like an extension of the ranger. The creature doesn't get its own initiative, it doesn't get its own round, but the ranger can use its attacks for it. So the ranger can command the beast to make attacks. Now that's pretty cool at lower levels, but the downside is that you personally are going to increase in power quite a lot as you level up, get magic items and so on, which aren't really available to your beast. It's going to stay at a 1/4 challenge rating, which means that you're very quickly going to make it obsolete, essentially. Your damage is always going to be pretty much higher. So the beast becomes less and less useful as time goes on. Now that is actually quite a good mold, if that makes sense, for just meeting a character in the wild. You said that your players are using animal handling to befriend creatures. So if you're befriending something out in the wild, it has a natural challenge rating in the book, which means, hey, they can bring it along, it'll stay at that same sort of nice level playing field, and eventually your characters will increase over the top of it because the creature itself is not special, it's just a pet. And that way, this creature, whatever you end up finding, whatever your players end up finding, won't really sort of steal the glory away. It's an ordinary wolf, let's say. And if this ordinary wolf were to deal the land the final blow on the evil ancient lich of untold power, it might feel a little bit cheap. So this one kind of emphasizes that your players have found a creature. It's not like a special creature, it's not its own character. They might treat it like that, but at the end of the day, it is firmly a beast. It's not an extra player. It's not going to be stealing the kill from the barbarian who's, wielding Thor's actual hammer, Mjolnir. It's just an ordinary wolf. So it's going to be contributing, but it probably won't be doing any heroic moments, In the Unearthed Arcana version of the Beastmaster, which is honestly what I prefer for making Rangers, Rangers get a chance to choose whatever creature that they would like, provided that they use the stats from certain listed creatures, which include things like apes and black bears, boars, giant badgers, and so on. But they can choose what it looks like, what kind of creature it actually is. So this gives them the chance to use something completely unusual. For example, they might use the stats from a panther, a totally viable option, but they could say that the creature that is tagging along with them is actually a displacer beast, maybe a cub that hasn't grown into using its tentacles, that hasn't grown into its natural displacement ability. And as the DM, you can maybe furnish them with these abilities over time instead of giving that player magical items, for example. So the important thing here is that that should remain as an option for rangers. They can choose whatever creature that they would like, whereas your players are going to be organically finding these creatures. It's far more problematic if all of your players want to start with a creature, but if they find them over time, then you can kind of determine what creatures, what stats you think are balanced for the game. So this is a way to keep rangers special because they get to choose whatever they like when they start. The most important part of the Beastmaster spec in the Unearthed Arcana, though, is that it's really treated like its own character. The beast gets skills and can increase its stats over time. It essentially levels up with the ranger. So it's really like playing two characters at once. It also gets, importantly, its own initiative in combat. Now, on top of all of this, the ranger gets those kind of magical features that your players probably would not have access to. They can conjure this creature out of the woods, out of the wilderness, and they can revive it if it dies, whereas your players, because they're not rangers, probably wouldn't have access to that kind of thing. So whichever one of these two options you want to base the beasts that your players will find on, it's important to leave gaps that would maintain the specialness of choosing a Beastmaster class. So for example, maybe you want to use the classic Beastmaster pet. If you're using Beastmasters in your game, they can use the Unearthed Arcana version, which is a little bit more special, or you can use the full characterness of the Unearthed Arcana version. If your players choose to pick up animals, you can use that, but rangers are exclusively able to summon their pets and also revive them if necessary. So that's kind of up to you. So next up, we need to think about how and when your players might acquire these creatures. Circling back to the main point that you asked about. So we know that the ranger unlocks this feature at 3rd level, which seems pretty fair actually. Any time after 3rd level seems like enough time to get used to your class, to get acquainted with the abilities that it already has before taking on additional complexity. So I would hold off on allowing your characters to have pets until after 3rd level, definitely not allowing them to create characters with pets from the start. Importantly, your players need to be the ones to look after, manage, and act as these pets on their turn, because otherwise, if everybody starts getting a pet, and you are playing all of them on their behalf, that means you're going to have way too many turns in combat. It's going to become way too much to juggle and think about all at once. So make sure that they're responsible for them, just like a real pet. Now, importantly, Malkaz mentioned that he is using animal handling for people to kind of befriend animals on the fly, which is totally what that skill is for, but it's definitely not for talking to animals or making them your allies instantly. It might calm a creature, stop it from attacking you, or convince it to, run away in a certain direction, what have you. It kind of manipulate and alter an animal's behavior. Think of it as a charisma check. When trying to persuade a human, but you're using it for animals. If you used persuasion on every person that you met and they instantly became a lifelong friend and fought by your side for the rest of your days, then that skill is massively overpowered. So it's just a subtle nudge or an influence in a certain person or creature, in this case behavior. That's what animal handling should be. So on the fly, when your players are trying to approach a beast carefully, not frighten it, or to stop it from attacking them, they might want to use animal handling, and that's totally fine. But to instantly pick it up as an ally is a little bit different. A good way of thinking about this is to think about how people train wild horses. They will capture a wild horse, and then over a process of months or even years, they will tame it, build up a relationship of obedience, and the horse will continue to resist until it is literally, as the expression goes, broken, and they can put a saddle on it. It no longer wants to resist, fighting for its own freedom. And this may take well over a year. So what you might want to do is have your players build on this relationship over time. Maybe an animal handling check is enough to make the creature want to follow you or willingly be captured, at which point your players would have to go and take the creature back to a city where they can spend time training it over perhaps a year with numerous animal handling checks. Now you can either have this as something that they do every time they come back to their kind of main hub city, if you have one, or you can take a brief break and just sort of fast forward, say that your players spend a year building on this relationship. In the meantime, the story advances in X, Y, and Z directions, and all the other characters get to level up or buy certain items. They can find out certain information in that time. Taking an in-game year out of the adventure is actually a really good idea a lot of the time, to kind of show that not everything has to be action all the time. You can get things done by spending time in a city and just living. One of them could be training an animal. Think about kind of like a detective adventure. Although we watch a lot of TV that says like, this is happening imminently, this is really exciting and entertaining, sometimes in real police cases things might go cold for a year or so and they need to pick it back up when they find out new information. That could be a good excuse to let someone tame an animal in that time. You might alternatively want to make a homebrew feat that your players can choose from, based on one of the Beastmasters that you prefer, which means that they're not going to pick this any sooner than 3rd level. They're going to get it at 4th or higher, whatever you think is reasonable. Additionally, if your players can purchase magical items, why not allow them to purchase pets in the same sort of way? They could purchase a pre-tamed pet, maybe taking up one of their attunement slots to bond to the beast, and using the classic Beastmaster as a guide. They can either attack with their attacks, or they can attack and act through the pet. So it literally becomes an extension of them, like a magic item, only a magic item that has the chance to die. So I feel like purchasing some sort of battle pet seems like a pretty viable option, actually. My personal favourite, however, is the following. And it should allow for what I feel is the combination of the best of all worlds, which is basically to have an animal companion with a very familial bond, a very strong bond. The creature would have its own initiative and would count as just another member of the party while not unbalancing it, which I feel like is the aim of having a pet. They're their own creature. While at the same time, this keeps the ranger and its Beastmaster pet entirely separate and a little bit special. So on page 92 of the Dungeon Master's Guide and 159 of the Player's Handbook, there are rules about players being able to pay what are called hirelings for their services as NPCs. In this option, it's kind of designed for multiple purposes, but it could be that you might want to pay a cleric to heal your friends, for example, but also includes hiring a soldier to accompany you in combat, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So if you create a beast that can level up and can have skills and everything like that, like a real character, as per the Unearthed Arcana version of the Beastmaster, players can then add it to the party roster that they then look after, and all they have to do is pay for its services on a daily basis, as they would if they were hiring a soldier to fight with them. Now, this is based on the idea of paying a soldier, a mercenary, to fight on your behalf, pay their wage, but you can kind of change that to include things like paying for the animal's upkeep, grooming, and food. So in this version, definitely make this the kind of Unearthed Arcana version of the beast, which is really treated like its own character. It can level up, it can gain skills, it can change its stats, and so on, just as a mercenary might. Additionally, when you add a character, including a beast, to a party in this way, they get an equal split of the experience points from everything that your players do. And that's how they level up, just like all the other characters, which means your players will have to think very carefully if they want to divide the XP again and again and again for each pet they want to have join them, because the pool of XP will get smaller and smaller and smaller each time. So it should be much easier to manage and thus balance. Hirelings in this fashion also have a loyalty score, which I think a beast definitely would, but a Beastmaster's pet does not. So this is a number that's kept secret from the players. Now usually this is the highest charisma from the person with the highest charisma in the group when you're hiring a mercenary, but if characters are individually hiring their own pets, then maybe this score should be the charisma of the person hiring them, or the animal handling score of the person hiring them. And this number can go up or down based on what situation this person is put in. So for example, if you are a mercenary, and you're fighting a huge dragon, you might think, well, this is really dangerous, the money's not worth this. I don't want to die for a cause I don't believe in. Their loyalty score might drop, and they might flee from combat. In the same way, if you get a beast and you're not a Beastmaster, they're not sort of intrinsically tied to your soul or what have you. So a beast might feel threatened or feel uncomfortable or not happy with what situation you put it in, and its score, unbeknownst to you, would get lower and lower until maybe it wants to leave if you treat it poorly. For example, if you have like a big cat and you keep having like sea-based adventures, the cat keeps getting in the water. Cats don't like water very much, and unbeknownst to you, its score would keep going down and down until its loyalty is very low. That, in my opinion, is the best way to allow players to have pets that function as really strong, interesting, vibrant characters, but also don't take away from Beastmasters, who get to revive their pets. They'll never run away from them, things like that. They don't have to pay for them, they don't have to share XP with them, but your players can still have a pet on the team as long as they're willing to pay, they're willing to provide for them, they're willing to care for them. They can upkeep their loyalty by treating them well, not constantly throwing them into life-threatening situations, and their animal handling skill becomes really important at this point. So this seems like a really fair option to me, because the Beastmaster gets something special in that they have a beast that will never run away from them. They don't have to continuously feed them or treat them really, really well in order to keep this bond, this kind of a magical bond between the creatures. So Malkaz, I hope this answered your question, and it's something that comes up a lot for me as well in game, so I'm really glad to have covered it, and to have like a really concrete idea about what I would do in this situation when it next arises. So thanks for joining me on this animal taming adventure. Until next time, happy beast hunting, and I'll see you later. Good girl. Come on, up here. Up. Good girl. Okay. Come here. Bella. Bella, come on. Up here. Come on. Come on. Bit more. Come on. Oh, you're a good girl. Good girl. Come on. You can do it. Let's get in shot. He's.